to evacuate their home planet, two inquisitive Betelgeusians, Finzo and Vohladio, traveled on an interstellar evacuation ship with their entire species for thousands of years, ultimately getting themselves excommunicated for asking too many heretical questions. After downloading their minds into freshly synthesized primate meat bodies, they were unceremoniously chucked into the nearest launch pod and blasted to Earth. Now, they reside in human bodies on their new planet, searching the human canon for worthy knowledge to send back to their overlords, and maybe make their stay here a little more bearable. These are the Betelgeusian Blasphemers.
Okay, welcome back to the Betelgeusian Blasphemers. Finzo, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Vohladio. How are you?
I'm good. How's your meat body treating you?
It's achy sometimes,
Yeah, I
but
know,
for the most part, it's
feeling
okay.
pain and stuff is total pain. Is like, it sucks, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a readjustment.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't appreciate like having to like eat and sleep. It was so much easier on the ship.
Yeah, it's true, but there's also like, there's the nice feelings of like wind in your hair and walking barefoot in the sand. Like you can't really trade those for thousands and thousands of years without a body. So, it's got pros and cons.
That's right. Yeah, you have to take the pain and the pleasure at the same time.
Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, good point. Good point. We read a pretty interesting book this week. So we both enjoyed listening to Naval a few weeks ago, and he had a lot of like book recommendations, and one of them was Jed Mckenna's Theory of Everything. And I think what Naval said about this book was that Jed is really dedicated to the truth, and I thought that's basically an understatement, because in Jed McKenna's Theory of Everything, he talks about basically taking skepticism to its ultimate conclusion, and basically arriving at the idea that I think, therefore I am, and that the only thing that you can actually know with certainty is that you exist because you're actually thinking and you're perceiving. But everything beyond that goes into the realm of belief instead of knowledge, and there's always like some element of uncertainty associated with that belief. So basically, this book is his attempt at giving a defense of what's basically solipsism, which is basically the belief that you're the only conscious being in the whole universe and the external world may or may not even exist. This book is basically a defense of that theory. So yeah, he calls that theory C-Rex, which means, I don't know where the Rex comes from, but he says that a lot of people are living in a paradigm of U-Rex, which is like centered on the external universe existing, and he arrived at a paradigm of that he calls C-Rex, which is like only consciousness existing. Consciousness is the only thing that there is. There is no external world. So yeah, I found the book, I liked the book, and I found it kind of funny at times. I enjoyed reading it at night. It was like kind of a relaxing book to read before bed. He has like a easygoing writing style. He's dealing with like tough ideas, but he's doing it in kind of a lighthearted way.
Which is hard to do for solipsism, bringing something from like way back in the day philosophy and making it in words that are like, C-Rex, like you said, or U-Rex. And I think the Rex refers to it being king. Like, I think he's saying that like the regular way we think about things is that the universe is king. It's out there, it's real. And then we are just a small point of consciousness within that universe. And then he's saying, no, you've got to flip the script a little bit. And what it is actually is that everything is consciousness. And what the universe that you perceive is just this small point.
Yeah, so U-Rex, like with the universe being king, is like the universe is like a big sheet of paper, maybe with a circle on it, and there's all these little dots on it. And the little dots are people, conscious people walking around, bumping into things, interacting with the physical world. But C-Rex is like everything is inside of the mind. There is no physical world.
Right, like the human brain, this human brain we have now, is actively hallucinating our conscious reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, I
Or
mean,
maybe
I think
not
it's
even, maybe not even the human brain, because that itself is physical. We could be like
true.
um, a brain in a vat somewhere, or what we think is our physical body might not even be the thing giving rise to our consciousness.
Right. So I guess we have to make a distinction between brain and mind.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So the mind is all that there is. And it reminds me a little bit of if you ever see um, first person video games rendered in the third person where you're standing behind the character and basically this cone comes out from the character where everything is rendered and then everything behind the character is put into um, like low resolution so that when the character moves from say left to right, this cone of perception comes with it. And as that cone sweeps over, say, a landscape that's in the video game, that's when the trees get populated into that section and everything behind the character is deconstructed and then to save RAM or to save like processing power. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like anything he's saying, kind of saying like anything that you're seeing, anything that you're perceiving, for all it matters. That's all there is what you know, like what you can see.
Mhm.
Which is a, I mean, I think it's kind of a. I don't think it's a new idea. I mean, like you said, it's kind of a rehashing of solipsism, which is this idea that you're the only thing that exists in the universe. And I think he's kind of taking that a bit further and saying like the universe, like you and the universe are the thing. Like it's just the thing. It's like one thing. And it's just your perception of that thing that is the thing. Like there's the perceiver, the perceived, and like the act of perceiving or something all together.
Perceiver, perceived, perception, I think.
Yeah,
The three create what consciousness is.
yeah. And I mean, maybe it's too early to get into it, but I have a question for you. And I guess that question is how do you tell if someone is full of shit?
I think you just think for yourself about what they say, and also you get a feeling like, are they being earnest or not?
I feel like he's being very earnest. I feel like he believes that
Well, this,
C-Rex is the king. Like that basically he's got an argument that is on you can't argue against it really.
no, you can't.
And I think the problem with I think therefore I am, like Descartes went back, this is I think it was 1700s whenever Descartes was around. This human philosopher decided that if he put, like you said, put skepticism, drove skepticism to its logical end, where he said, okay, I think, therefore I am. And he's like, this is pretty crappy because, I might be the only thing in the universe and around me are just automatons or hallucinations made by some evil god. And what Descartes did from there was he's like, okay, the thing is like, I know that I exist. So there must be something out there, even if there is an evil god making me see what I see, then that necessitates that I exist. But I think that Jed Mckenna here is saying something a little different, where he's like, there is no that logical thing where it's like, if there is someone to be deceived, like they have to be being deceived, so they must exist. That's left out of Jed McKenna's thing, and it's kind of just saying like, there is only what you see, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So do you think that the gist of what he said was like, there is an external world, but it doesn't exist unless it's being perceived? Or do you think that he was saying there literally is no external world? It's all the same thing as a big dream or the same thing as a big hallucination. Like when you're having a dream, the dream world doesn't physically exist. And that is indistinguishable from any experience of consciousness. Like he's going like right to the fundamental description of what it means to be conscious. He even says, like, it doesn't matter how powerful some god could be, they can never actually know any more than any other conscious entity. Any conscious entity can only ever know that it exists, and that's it. Did you feel like he was implying that there is in fact an external world that kind of needs to be perceived in order to, like, quote unquote exist? Is that what you're saying?
I think kind of. I think like he's trying. What I got was like, to the conscious observer, when it dies, say, the world ends.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like the entire universe is contained within that consciousness, for that consciousness.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Assume that there is like a real external world that, like, we're walking around inside of. If there was only one person in the entire universe and they died, would the universe still exist?
Well, I guess that depends on whether you think that there are other conscious beings out there, because he kind of touches on that at the end where he's saying he's like, I have reason to believe that you, or I'm acting like you are a conscious being.
Yeah.
But I think that's it.
So
if I could just,
how can you tell if somebody's full of shit? Like, there's a bit of a paradox here, and he touches on this a little bit, where he's like, this is what, like, a realistic, he kind of was saying, like, if we're going to be adults about this, like, we should acknowledge this. He's like, this is what, like, a realistic scientist would say at the beginning of all their papers and everything. We're assuming that there is in fact a world out there that we're studying. Yet he's kind of he bothers to write the books. He bothers to try to explain this to people. He bothers to criticize Western philosophers and scientists. So he's acting as if there are other people out there, and he's acting as if there is an external world. And he's trying to convince it. He even said, like, it's kind of a paradox, because the book is often written like in a way where he's having a dialogue with a few friends of his and their kids, and they're asking questions, and then he's like interfacing with them, like playing the part of C-Rex.
mm-hmm.
And he said, like, when you're having a dream, if you realize that you're having a dream and you went lucid, would you spend your time arguing with the dream characters, trying to convince them that they weren't real?
Yeah, I have that quote saved here.
It was a kind of a cool part, but it's kind of like, that's what he's doing. And he says, the only reason I'm doing this is because I feel like a creative urge to write this book. Like, he just gets a kick out of writing the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he says, when you realize you're lucid, you no longer wear a gown in the madhouse. Now you wear a visitor's badge. Like, if you were in a dream and you realize you were lucid, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm no longer a part of this thing. Yeah. I'm visiting it.
Yeah. So how, when you have a super vivid dream, it feels real. And then you wake up and you say, okay, now I'm back to reality. But sometimes you can have like a double wake up. And at the end of the day, like, we don't know that, like, we're not dreaming right now. Like, what we call reality really could just be like a super vivid dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do you tell the difference, and why would you bother talking to other people? Like, if they're basically like fundamentally the same as dream characters, like even me and you talking to each other, like, you could be a dream character for me, or I could be a dream character for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why bother like talking to dream characters? Like, why bother like trying to get to the bottom of it or to convince them of anything?
Yeah, and I think that we saw something similar in Illusions.
Uh-huh.
Who wrote that?
Richard Bach.
Richard Bach. Bach? Yes. Where he was saying, like, you know, the Messiah kind of quits and he's like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. He is taking the idea that you can do whatever you want in this world. Like, if you are truly lucid dreaming, then you just have to, like, if your consciousness is everything, then you should be able to do whatever you want. And I think that was one of the things that I feel like, I guess why I asked my first question, like, how can you tell if someone is full of shit, by asking, well, this is what was really on my mind, was like, what does it matter if C-Rex is real if you can't really change anything with your mind. Like in Illusions, they had this message of at least like you can do whatever you want as long as you like believe it into existence, kind of thing. But here he's kind of just saying like, I guess I just like my practical side doesn't see the utility of C-Rex.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So when I think about this, I realize that he's right. Like I realize that if you think about it a lot, like you kind of eventually get to C-Rex. It makes sense. If you practice extreme skepticism, like I don't know that you're not a philosophical zombie, meaning just like you're in a human body, but you have no consciousness, or the people out there, they're walking around as if they're a conscious person, but they're just, the lights aren't on. There's nothing like it is to be them. Other people could be those types of philosophical zombies, but you can't live your life like that. Like there's no utility in acting like that. Like there's really only utility and a meaningful life in at least pretending like there is a world out there and that other people are real people. So when you sit around thinking about it, you can arrive at C-Rex, but then when you leave your house, you just get like thrust back into U-Rex. That's what happened to me. When I was reading the book, I started thinking, okay, this makes sense. And I've thought about this a lot before. I remember being younger and kind of realizing that solipsism makes sense because you can't really argue against it. And then I would get this feeling of like, oh no, this is a bad thing to think. Like you're not supposed to think this. Like it's a bit of like a taboo thing philosophically.
Yeah.
Like maybe because it's just like a dead end. Like it's just like there's, you just get there and then it's kind of boring because there's like, you can't have any fun with it. There's nowhere to get.
Yeah, and I think that's why I brought up Descartes, because he gets to the same point, but then he's like, okay, let's build back up. Yeah, and then he starts sort of building back up to where he can start asserting things that he knows to be true, or that he has like a certain likelihood of it being true.
Yeah, so I think that they refer to his statement, right? His famous statement, I think, therefore I am, as the foundation of knowledge. And then you can build on top of that, but like the farther away from that you get, the higher degree of uncertainty you reach. Like as soon as you step away from that, you're already stepping into an area where you don't have full certainty. And the farther you go, the less certain you are.
Yeah, and to Jed Mckenna's credit, he did have one thing in here that I thought was interesting. He says, if you live in a fantasy alone, you're mentally ill. If you live with a small group, you're a brainwashed cult member. And if you live there with a large group, you're respectably religious. And I think he's touching on that kind of fact that if you just, sit around being like, I'm the only thing that exists in this sort of universe, or you have this belief, right? Then that's fine. That's the only truth you can have. But then once you get a couple people together, you have to start, if that's the only truth, sorry?
You have to start acting like they're real.
Yeah, and to get at any other sort of truth, you can't. Like, I guess he's saying like, that is the truth. Everything else is some kind of intersubjective agreement that you all just agree to believe and then move on.
Yeah. We have a lot of those in our society, like money. We all just agree to believe in money. We all just agree to believe in laws. We all just agree to believe in like democracy or whatever political system we have. We all just agree to believe in like what our names are. It's all just collective. It's just a collective structure, but it's not objectively true. It's a structure of ideas that is like not objectively true. It's just like, it's not based on anything. It's just collective agreement.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty amazing thing for an entire species to agree on certain things. Maybe it's the way
it's necessary to build something. It's necessary to build a society.
Well, that's it, right? Like evolution wouldn't favor Jed Mckenna back in the day. Like if Jed Mckenna was just sitting there on the African savannah thinking about how
he's the only person who exists.
Yeah, he'd just get eaten by hyenas and then not procreate, and then there wouldn't be any more little Jed Mckennas running around.
Yeah. So the point is, you can, if you're being extremely philosophically robust and taking skepticism to its extreme, you do arrive at the conclusion that you probably that your experience is indistinguishable from being the only real thing in the universe. But there's no utility in that. You can't live a meaningful life that way. You can't really like get anything going, even if this is just your own dream world. You can't really get anything going unless you play the game a little bit, right?
Hmm.
You have to sort of like allow yourself to be swept up in what might be a dream to a certain extent if you really want to build anything, a community, or get anything going.
And in that idea, I think that there might be some value in the idea, like in the premise that you see Rex is real, and that you're like, okay, so I'm kind of stuck in this like world, which is just in my head, and I'm gonna play the game, but I'm going to enjoy playing the game rather than getting um, caught up in it, like you're saying. And I think that if you look at like other, even like more like religious traditions where they say like, I think there's some portions of Christianity that think that the earth is kind of a testing ground where there's all the like everything's just sort of, it's just a time for us to explore, and then after that we become one with God or whatever. And that kind of gives you the same sense of levity where you can go through your daily life without getting caught up in the dramas and the gossips and the pain, if you're just thinking, oh, this is all not really real.
Yeah, it's like it's a narrative structure that gives you the permission to be free.
Yeah.
We need that. We really need that to mitigate existential angst, and it can come from different spiritualities in different forms. And
Yeah,
Christianity
exactly.
does it by saying, like, yeah, this is just a testing ground for the real thing, which is after we die.
It seems to be one of those sort of human universal truths. Like I think Buddhism talks about the same thing, right? Like they're saying all things are empty of inherent existence. And once you realize that, you can say, okay, so the only reason I'm here is because of other things. And I'm kind of like, nothing's really solid. And it gives you this sense of like freedom that you can detach yourself from painful emotions or the drudgery of something, right?
Takes
Like
the edge off of existence.
take the edge off. Yeah. Like I've had lucid dreams before where I just like look up really close at something mundane and have been like, I can't believe how real this is. And you could be doing the same thing in your real life, walking along and looking at a tree and being like, look at the texture of that bark. Or,
Yeah,
eating food and being like, that was a delicious egg.
yeah, yeah. Just at a personal level, it's just raw experience, whether it's in a dream or in what we call reality. It's just raw experience that you can appreciate.
Yeah. And we have the luxury, or like a lot of people in the developed world who aren't trying to, find shelter and food as their main prerogatives. We have a fair amount of time to try and do that. I think that my evolution sort of comment was saying, like, you have no time to think about how everything might be an illusion if you're hungry and have no roof over your head,
Yeah,
or a lion's trying to eat you, kind of thing. Like, and like if you die, if you get eaten by a lion, there's no chance to experience these kind of feelings like you're talking about. You need some sort of time. And it seems like the Buddhist traditions or that sort of Christian idea I mentioned, or Jed McKenna is saying like, you don't have to be stuck in this sort of survival mode. You could just step out of the survival mode and, go on like story mode or like casual observing mode for most of your life.
wow, interesting. Yeah, I remember Jordan Peterson talking about how the fundamental truth is that life is suffering and that you can't deny pain.
Mm-hmm.
You can deny that a lot of things exist, but when you're in pain or when you see somebody in pain and it's like obvious, it's the one thing that like you can't deny.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and again, that statement there, that life is suffering, kind of does the same thing I feel like Jed did, where it's like, yeah, it's true, but build up from there. Like Buddhism sort of started with that and said, okay, that sucks. How can we get rid of that or mitigate it in some way?
cool. So that's an interesting take on it. So these ideas have been talked about in the past by different people, different philosophers. I think George Berkeley was one who was a defender of idealism. And the opposite of idealism would be materialism, or I think scientific materialism. And Jed talks about at one point in the book, he has like almost like a little fable of like somebody arguing with Berkeley about whether or not an external world exists. And the guy takes Berkeley's idea of idealism, which is just that everything is in the mind, and he says, "Here's how I'm going to refute it." And he kicks a rock, and he says, "I refute it thus." And Jed McKenna says, like, this is basically I think he said, I call this the hissy response, which is essentially like the only way to refute this is to basically say like interact in some way with the external world and then say, look, there's obviously something out there. There's obviously something real outside of the mind because I just interacted with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just an extension of that. Like you could point to like science being able to like reproduce results. You could point to pain existing. You could point to like the sun rising every day, but it's just an extension of like kicking a stone, interacting some way with the world, and then saying it must exist. But it doesn't actually mean that we're not in some kind of simulation or in some kind of dream world, and all of that is like some kind of theater. So if you tried to poke a hole in C-Rex, if you tried to poke a hole in the theory that everything is in the mind, and argue that no, actually these minds are like emergent from physical matter that's in a UREX universe, that's in a physical world, how would you do it? Like, how would you poke a hole in Jed McKenna's theory?
I don't think you can poke a hole in his theory that he would be satisfied with. I think like
no matter what you said, he would say it was just part of that hissy response of I refute it thus and kick a rock kind of thing. It would be always just an extension of that, right?
Yeah, no matter what you say, he's just going to say, yeah, but that's just in your head. Or like, yeah, but you're just perceiving that and that's all there is.
You're just perceiving it and then believing that it's real.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best response to that is similar to the rock kicking thing, but it's more of a punch in the head or a slap upside the head, where it's just like, be useful. Like, why are you telling me this? It's not helpful.
Okay.
I think my main criticism would be that I fall back on some sense of practicality. And if this C-Rex thing is actually helpful, which I'm not sure it is, because it does like seem like this sort of philosophical dead end that can be very depressing or like fill you with kind of dread or some sense of isolation, right? Like in a way it's true. Like you never can understand what another person is thinking or feeling. It's just you here. And that may be true. It probably is true. But so what? I guess I haven't heard a so what. I think Jed is assuming that my want for the truth exceeds my desire for happiness.
That's what Jed is saying.
I think that's what he's assuming of me, but I might be like that guy in the Matrix who was like, put me back in, man.
Yeah,
like,
Cypher.
Yeah. But I don't want to be here in the real world, man. Like, put me back in.
Yeah. So you would be in the ignorance is bliss. I don't want to just sit around be feeling lonely, thinking that all my friends and family are just dream characters. I want to act like they're real because that gives me a structure to build a meaningful life on. It gives me something I can be pragmatic with. There's nothing pragmatic about like trying to argue that I'm the only one here and trying to argue that we live in this like, or that you live in like this dark, lonely universe. There's nothing good about that. So why would you try to argue for something that sucks?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind
I
of.
think so.
Maybe a good response is just like C-Rex is no fun. You know, maybe if you're being like hyper realistic, hyper serious, and like hyper skeptical, you have to admit that you arrived there. But then, yeah, it's like, so what? Like, that sucks. Like, do you really want to live that way? He also mentions in the book, or at the beginning of each chapter, he's got quotes. I think one of them was, there is no ultimate meaning in life, therefore life has to be given meaning, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And so if you want to give life meaning, you have to like play the game to a certain extent. And it's much easier to give life meaning if you like kind of like accept like you, Rex, to a certain extent. It's hard to give life meaning when you're in C-Rex. Because what's the point of doing anything?
You're saying so if consciousness is all that there is, the perceiver, perception, and perceived or whatever, then it's hard to have meaning, or it's easier to have meaning?
Then it's harder to have meaning.
Right. So there has to be some kind of external world out there for you to have some kind of meaning.
Because meaning is arbitrary. Meaning is a story that you tell yourself. And it's easier to tell yourself a story that is convincing if you believe in the Rex paradigm. If you believe that other people are real and your friends and family are real, and there's a world out there that you can build a structure in, and that there's a society out there that you can build a structure in. If you believe that stuff, it's easier to give your life meaning. If you think this is basically a dream, you're ultimately free to run around and do whatever you want, but you're also always lonely. Maybe you're extremely philosophically honest, but you're also just, I don't think that would be very fun.
No,
But you could
I think
definitely argue that it wouldn't be, and that would be a way to poke a hole in C-Rex.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument. I also think that like the whole C-Rex idea opens up a lot of moral considerations. Like, why would you ever donate money or time?
I was thinking about that too. Why would you, because when you're in a dream, you can kind of like, if you're having a dream and you become lucid, I think that's a great example, because it's a good analogy for like how Jed McKenna looks at his life. He looks at it like it's just a big dream. That's a great analogy. So if you were having a dream and you kind of realized you were dreaming, you went lucid, you can like be an asshole to people in your dream and like not feel bad about it because you know they're not real. Like if you believe this stuff and you are living in C-Rex, like you might as well be an asshole to everybody. Like, yeah, why donate money to anybody? Why be polite to people? Why get out of their way on the sidewalk?
It's kind of essentially dehumanizing everyone but yourself.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. Which is dangerous. I mean, I sometimes feel like if you watch, maybe this is just me projecting onto these people, but if you like see serial killers after they get caught, or like just like putting your head inside someone's head who's like, I'm just gonna like murder a bunch of people, and like it just seems like they're kind of like, meh, nothing really matters. I'll just do it and I'll be dead, and then who fucking cares? Like four generations from now, I'll just be some name, and nobody will remember the people that I killed. And you know, like it doesn't matter. Like if it just doesn't matter, then they just sort of like do it.
Well, I guess like in the real ultimate sense, like there isn't necessarily objective meaning to life. So you do have to give your life meaning. And they are basically like playing a power game of like, you can do whatever you want if you have the power to pull it off. So they're like really like, they're like, I'm going to give my life meaning by like just doing whatever I feel like. And I don't care if it like hurts other people because it won't matter in the long run. I don't know. Like so you're thinking they're kind of like taking like the C-Rex approach and then just doing whatever they want because who cares?
Yeah, I guess I'm saying like if you give some sadist like Jed McKenna's book, it might be the straw that like breaks the camel's back and turns him into a massive serial killer. I'm just saying it might be nuclear. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I was saying earlier, when I was reading this book and really thinking about it, I understand the mentality of C-Rex, but then as soon as I go outside, I just get like violently thrust back into U-Rex. Like as soon as like I'm thinking in my head, like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like I don't know that this isn't a simulation. I don't know that this isn't a dream. But I go outside and I pass somebody on the sidewalk and I just like instantly go like, hey, good morning. And I kind of like get out of their way and like I'm polite to people. And then I'm thinking, I wouldn't be doing that if I truly believed in C-Rex. So my actions show me that I actually believe in U-Rex. And and then like I turn on the news or whatever and I see all this COVID stuff and I go, okay, that's making me feel like U-Rex is real because there's like a bunch of undeniable stuff imposing on my life from the external world. And if it's not real, then why can't I just like stop it? But you can't stop it. Like stuff comes and imposes on you. And it's like feels pretty real when the external world is imposing itself on you. That's kind of like the pain argument. And so I'm like, when I think about it, you get to C-Rex, but then when you live, you just get thrust back into U-Rex. I was out driving around the other day and I just saw this guy kind of wandering around in traffic, like across a busy road. And I thought, I think that guy might be in C-Rex. These cars are just a figment of my imagination.
They are until he gets struck by one, I think.
Yeah, and then he'll be reminded of U-Rex.
Yeah. I think like, yeah, maybe if Jed McKenna is really pulling back and like he's like cutting off layers and he's like, listen, you peel the onion back far enough, and then there's this like one thing which is you, which is perceiving everything, which is also everything, which is just the perceiver, the perceived, the perceiving. I think that might be a bit of a I think he might have stopped peeling too far. Or stop peeling too soon. Like when the thing is, if like you peel the layers of an onion back, eventually you get to nothing. And I think he's gone like, see, here's like a kernel of what you are, and that's you, Rex. But on top of that, and underneath that, there's nothing. Like there's just emptiness. And then on top of that, you build all this other stuff on until you get to, huge societies, like global trade, like all these things only work because like we're building out from this kernel of nothingness. And I guess I'm just coming back to the same argument of like, so what, Jed? Even if you're right, which I don't think you are, then like what's the point? What's the point?
Yeah,
I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with him. I'm frustrated with this human.
That's a funny way to put it. Yeah, some of these humans are funny, eh?
Yeah. This one strikes me as being a little self-assured, and anyone who's a little too sure of themselves makes me think that they're kind of full of shit, to use a human phrase.
Well, Naval says that that Jed is seriously dedicated to the truth, and maybe that's just like his thing. He's just like, I'm going to be the guy that's like keeps on reminding people that we don't actually know any of this stuff.
Yeah, that's so annoying.
Out of that. Like he said, like every scientific paper should begin by saying like, we assume that there is in fact an external world that we're collectively interacting with, and it should come with that disclaimer. It's like, okay, that's just like it's like nitpicking, but technically right.
Yeah, it's like an epistemic thing where it's Correct. Like, how do you know that you know, man?
Correct.
Like, how do you
like
know
an epistemological
anything?
Thing.
Yeah, and it's like, we don't, man, but we're gonna keep trying because it makes things better for the real world. Like if we were just like, it's just like, oh man, like these people seem to be in some kind of coma. Like maybe if we make some kind of medicine from a pancreas, like we could save them. It's like, yeah, but how do you know, man? Like, why don't you just like, everything you're doing is complete.
How do you know that those people are even real?
Yeah, and it's less like if you just believe that, you'd be like, and like let people die of diabetic comas instead of, making insulin.
So what I'm getting from all this is like, ultimately, there's no point in doing anything. In order to feel like there's a reason to do something, you have to believe in some sort of story. Like, in order to feel like it's important to, like, make insulin to help people, you have to believe in a story. You have to believe that, like, these people are out there, they're real, they're suffering, let's help them, and then the world will be better. And you're imagining like that story, that narrative happening, and then you're like, okay, that's my meaning, that's why I'm going to get up today.
I
Like,
think
you
just
must
touched
tell
on.
yourself a story at some level. Ultimately, you're telling yourself a story, and ultimately that story is fiction.
Well, maybe
And
that's
that's the only way to have meaning in this world, is to believe in a story that's ultimately fictional, and then forget that it's fictional.
yeah. I think that might just be another criticism against Jed himself, where Jed's purpose, his meaning that he's created for himself, is to be the guy that just says, you could never really know anything. It's just all you, man. And you could say like, Jed, that's just your meaning.
That's
You're
just
a
like your opinion, man.
biological human who is programmed to have a story, to create your own meaning. And that's your meaning, is to tell everyone that nothing is real except for their own
Well,
like
Jed has got us
perceptions.
talking.
Yeah, he did get us talking,
So
which is
Jed
good.
has also written a few other books, and he wrote something that's called the trilogy. I don't know that much about it. Do you?
No, I don't know anything about it.
I don't know anything about it either. I'm a little bit curious to read it, because I did like this book. I did get something out of it. It did get us talking. It did get me questioning. And I'm going to say that it got me to a point of like actual pragmatic conclusions. So I'm glad that Jed is being that guy.
I'm glad he is too. I think it's one of those topics for me where I get really energized about it, but I hate it at the same time. Like when I was reading this book, multiple times I put it down and I was like, oh, Jed, come on, man. Come on. And then I'd pick it right back up and keep reading.
Yeah, throw it across the room and then just go get it and keep reading it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would recommend it. I would recommend it with a critical mind, like to sort of take what he says with a grain of salt.
Yeah, yeah. You don't just read it and then believe it and then that's it. Like, it forces you, it challenges you to think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would recommend this book. I
I would
enjoyed it.
recommend it too. Yeah, to our overlords. I think that maybe they should read it as a kind of, exercise in thinking about what's really real, but
Yeah,
treat it as a method, not a fact.
good idea. Yeah, this book was a good way to begin a conversation about epistemology.
Yes. Yes.
It's a good kind of an introduction to epistemology, I guess.
I'd say so. Accessible anyway.
Yeah. Sounds like both of us would recommend this book, Jed McKenna's Theory of Everything, kind of an intro to epistemology, get you thinking, get you questioning what the experience of consciousness really is, get you questioning like where you get your meaning in life from. And maybe it's just a fun book to read before bed sometime. But I would recommend it, and so would Finzo.
I would definitely recommend it. It gives you great dreams.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Finzo. And to the rest of you, we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Vohladio. See you. If you humans have any questions, comments, complaints, or recommendations for future things to send back to the overlords, please send us an email at beetlejuicyandblasphemers@gmail.com. and thank you for listening.